Thank you, Joseph. It was very interesting discussion and what you presented a peep into the future, giving what we need to do for the future, sustainability as well as the technology adoption are the important things. I think this message is very clear to us, and what COVID-19 has taught us that unless we digitalize, we will not be able to survive for the future. That is also very clear. I think few questions have come. First question is, though we all know that digitalization is very important, we don't find the adequate talent for this digitalization. How the West has overcome this problem?
The talent issue is a real issue, and what's interesting that what we're seeing is that a lot of the younger generation, the new folks entering the industry, are much more technologically savvy than those of us that have been working for many years, and so they're kind of digital natives. They have expectations of how that's going to work. They've been trained in that space. What they don't necessarily have is the experience with the production processes in which we're operating and running, and the challenges of the business and the connectivity that way. And so it's hard to take a new hire and drop them in and get lots of productivity out of them very quickly. So, what we're finding is that the folks that are doing really well at this are actually looking at talent within their organization who they can teach to do the digital work, as well as hiring the talent from the digital outside and bringing them in where they can teach them the specifics of the operations and the disciplines that way, and try and find this bridge between how I can repurpose and reskill people from inside the company with those things that they need, with bringing people from the outside to teach them what I already know, which is how to actually run the operations that we operate. So it's a combination of the two.
Thank you, Joseph. That was quite comprehensive. Second question is related to the digitalization. Now we have the brownfield. So many factories are running today without complete digitalization, and there are greenfield which are coming. So we can definitely implement in the greenfield projects. We can implement digitalization very well, but we find it very difficult to implement into the brownfield because it will require stoppages of some of the factories, requiring a lot of major changes, validation. All this will be required to be done. Now, how do we handle this type of dilemma?
So it's a great question. I'll share some examples for some other industries, right? The sensor packages, sensor technology and sensor packages. If I go back a decade, it might have cost me, $50,000 to put a vibration sensing package on a piece of equipment, and then another $150,000 to wire it all up and get it so that I could actually have it connected all the way back to a server that was collecting the information and the data. We're seeing packages now with the miniaturization and technology. One of the things that we're seeing is with sensor technology, data capture being more local, you can actually have a similar sensor package that would have, like I just described, $50,000 plus $150,000 to get it installed. These can be implemented for under $5,000 for sure, and approaching $500 with mobile packages that I can go and put on a piece of equipment and record the data for 24 hours or 48 hours, then take that data and then analyze it offline. So we're seeing kind of this hybrid of using the sensor technology to collect the data, then analyzing it offline as a much cheaper solution for moving in the direction of digitalization and gathering the information. The other thing that's interesting is that the wireless technologies allow us to basically automate data collection in a way that we couldn't do 10 years ago at much cheaper cost than physically wiring assets as well. So that's another option, is to kind of skip the wired technology and jump to the wireless technology inside of our factories and leverage that as a way of kind of allowing things to happen. But it does require within life sciences, we have higher requirements for process validation and those things. And so we have to get better and faster at that. But the technology itself is enabling things to happen in a way that we couldn't even envision 10 years ago, and don't have to be, that allows us to modify and upgrade our brownfield facilities in a way that we wouldn't have imagined 10 years ago.
Thank you. Last question is related to the sustainability. As a pharmaceutical industry, we generate a lot of plastic waste actually. Strips packages, blister packages, HDP bottles, all this is a waste actually from the environmental. Are there sustainable options open now or are available now? That's the question.
It's a great question, and one that the plastics industry is wrestling with as well, in terms of how to drive that. I guess what I'd say is that there's degrees of sustainability that are available now, right? There are different sources of plastic that allow for recycled material in the plastics value stream, where people are taking recycled plastics back through the virgin fiber or virgin plastic process, and they're able to kind of get credit for that through recycled plastics. We're seeing continuing thin walling, so you don't necessarily have to. You can dramatically reduce the amount of plastic in a particular part or bag. Or an example would be water bottles. Again, 5 years ago, water bottles, as I recall, standard drinking bottles, had about 20 grams of plastic in them, and I think the ones today are down to 6 grams of plastic. So it's been almost a 2/3 reduction in the plastic into a water bottle. What would be the analog of that for the life sciences industry in terms of thin walling and using less material? And then, of course, there are greener sources of, again, when you go back to this kind of scope 2, scope 3, there are greener sources of materials that you can use. There is a big differentiation between, and again, I'll pick on plastics as an example. There is about a 90% reduction in scope 3 emissions on plastics based upon where you source, where they source, I should say, the ethylene that gets used within their to make the polyethylene materials. So an example would be Gulf of Mexico, North America, where I'm located. Gulf of Mexico natural gas has a much lower carbon footprint than some sources of oil sands natural gas coming from northern North America that way. So there are differences, and if you think through and map all those, you can get to much lower carbon sources of plastic. So lower carbon sources, lower amounts of plastic used, and more recyclability of it all lead to a lower carbon footprint.
Thank you. I said last question, but there is one more question has come from the audience. Let me ask that question. Question is, what role do you forecast for IoT and AI to play in manufacturing and operations in future, in next 5 years?
So say that question again, please.
What role do you forecast for IoT and artificial intelligence to play in manufacturing and in operations in next 5 years?
So we are already, yep. So IoT and artificial intelligence in manufacturing over the next 5 years. We are seeing tremendous leaps forward in other industries that are adopting the IoT and the AI in terms of advanced analytics to drive process optimization. So tremendous improvements in yield, throughput, energy, quality in an advanced analytics fashion. We're seeing 30%, 40% improvements in throughput, right? We're seeing on energy consumption, 15, 20% reductions in energy consumption. through advanced analytics. So, those are coming, and those are going to be a big deal for the manufacturing operations, and how we can use that to literally jump onto a new S curve in terms of yield, energy, throughput, quality through our manufacturing processes. Where I get really excited with the IoT and the AI is through the connectivity through the supply chain, and the ability to improve resilience and improve reliability of our supply chain by simultaneously collapsing the amount of inventory that we have in the supply chain and increasing the responsiveness and the agility of our supply chain to dramatically reduce lead times through the supply chain. So I see it in those two areas as being something that's going to be a big deal within life sciences over the next 5 years.
Thank you. I think last question now, no more questions. We are coming to the close of the session. Can you talk about the importance of alignment of global regulatory requirements for implementing new technologies like continuous manufacturing, 3D technology, all those?
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer for that. It's something we all want and hope for. Something that would be in many respects necessary to unlock the full potential. But I think that it's going to be driven by, different regulatory regimes will be further in front of that than others. And unfortunately, I think it's really going to come, personal view, it's going to come down to, the major markets, the major regulatory environments, what they'll lead on this. They may not lead on the technology adoption, but they'll certainly be what we have to watch for in terms of, the rate of adoption to drive the investment.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for a very interesting session. I think a lot of questions also came from the audience, so a lot of interest it is generated. That is very clear. So thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you.